Philippines is set to file yet another diplomatic protest against China over the incident yesterday at Bajo de Masinloc, or Scarborough Shoal. It happened around 8:30 yesterday morning when a Chinese Navy helicopter with tail number 68 tailed and flew too close to a Bureau of Fisheries and Aquatic Resources, or BFAR, aircraft that was doing a routine monitoring. The Chinese aircraft came as close to just 3 meters away from the BFAR plane, shocking the journalists on board. In a statement, the National Maritime Council said it was deeply disturbed by the unprofessional and reckless maneuvers of the PLA Navy helicopter, as it blatantly endangered the safety of the pilots and passengers of the BFAR aircraft. It also showed disregard for international norms on airmanship and flight safety. The United States also criticized the dangerous maneuvers by the PLA Navy helicopter. In a post on X, U.S. Ambassador to the Philippines, Mary Kay Carlson, called on China to refrain from coercive actions and to settle its disputes peacefully in accordance with international law. As expected, China defended its actions, with their Southern Command saying the BFAR aircraft had illegally intruded into their airspace and severely violated their sovereignty. China calls Bajo de Masinloc Huangyan Dao. Beijing also accused the Philippines of spreading false narratives, to which Philippine Coast Guard spokesperson Commodore Tarriela took offense.
So, I think this is the most dangerous, no? Dahil ginawa nila ito while our personnel, together with some of our media friends, were actually on board the BFAR aircraft. What I can say is that this level of aggression is pretty much higher compared with the past experiences that we had.
Joining us now on the show is Philippine Coast Guard spokesperson for the West Philippine Sea, Commodore Tarriela. Commodore, good evening. Thanks for squeezing us in. I know you're busy tonight.
Thank you for having me, and a pleasant evening to your viewers.
Okay, Commodore, the recent incident, actually it was just yesterday when the Chinese Navy helicopter came too close to the BFAR aircraft. First of all, were you on board, and also how many times did the incident happen?
Unfortunately, Regina, I was not on board because I attended
Oh, that's right,
congressional hearing yesterday. So those who were on board are only some of the photo journalists and some of the members from the Philippine Coast Guard and the Bureau of Fisheries and Aquatic Resources.
Do we know how many times the Navy helicopter came, a little too close to the BFAR aircraft? Was it just once? Because we saw the video, we played it, but it looks like from that video it was just once. But was it repeated?
Actually, the PLA Navy helicopter somewhat shadowed the aircraft for almost 40 minutes. While above the territorial airspace of Bajo de Masinloc. And there are only 2 instances that they conducted dangerous maneuver. The first one was the one that we showed on my X post, the one that came close as near as 3 meters. And the other instance was the distance of 10 meters, also on the port side, meaning on the left side of the aircraft.
Give us an idea, Commodore, no? Has this been happening? Because earlier we were chatting over here, and it seems to have been escalating, at least from where we stand. So we are not in the West Philippine Sea. We do not go on these trips. But in the beginning, diba, boat to boat. Tapos nagkaroon nung, when our researchers from UP Marine Institute were there in the case, nagkaroon ng chopper to boat, right? And then now it seems to be aircraft to aircraft. Would you agree that this is a kind of an escalation, so somewhat?
Well, this is considerably the most dangerous action of the PLA Navy helicopter because last year, what they did to this BFAR aircraft was they only used flares, right? And just like what you mentioned a while ago, last month, while the marine scientists of BFAR was also on in Pag-asa case, they used PLA Navy helicopter over the small rubber boat. So, but for us, we still, regardless of how the level of or scale of aggression that they're doing, this is outright illegal and unlawful. But we don't want to interpret this that China really wants to escalate the tension to the next level. We can assume that probably this is the only recourse that they have for them to discourage the BFAR aircraft to carry out an MDA patrol over the territorial airspace of Bajo de Masinloc.
What makes it even scarier is, unlike ships, there is no way for the pilots to communicate directly with each other, right? So take us there, Commodore. Give us a sense of how dangerous it was for the pilot at that time.
Well, I think the hardest part for the pilot is that he doesn't really know how the PLA Navy helicopter will approach towards his aircraft. So even if he wants to keep away from the chopper, he cannot anticipate whether the chopper will go above the aircraft or go below him, or even get closer on the left side. So I think that's the greatest challenge for the BFAR pilot on how he can be able to ensure the safety passage of the aircraft while the helicopter continuously harassing them.
Right. So in a case like that, what is the safest thing to do? Is it for him to just cruise along at the same altitude, or to move away?
Well, based on my conversation with the pilot yesterday, he said since you cannot anticipate where the chopper is going or how crazy the Chinese PLA Navy pilot will go, whether above or below you. You just have to continue the flight direction where you're heading.
So
Well-
stick to the flight path, basically.
Well,
Yeah.
Commodore, you did call it the most dangerous act by China because it could have led to a disaster. But moving forward, Commodore, ano po ba yung mga plano ng Philippine government or the National Task Force for the West Philippine Sea to ensure the safety of our troops moving forward?
Well, for the National Task Force West Philippine Sea, particularly the Philippine Coast Guard and the Bureau of Fisheries and Aquatic Resources, the concern of the Chinese government has always been to discourage the government forces, particularly Coast Guard and BFAR, in carrying out maritime patrol, whether at sea or up air. So, in particular in Bajo de Masinloc, last January 4, the Chinese Coast Guard deployed its biggest monster ship, also to scare away not just the Filipino fishermen, but even the Philippine Coast Guard for us to be discouraged in patrolling as well. But despite of all this level of aggression and threat and force projection of the Chinese Coast Guard and even the unlawful activities of the PLA Navy helicopter, nothing will change. The Philippine Coast Guard will still carry out maritime patrol in our exclusive economic zone in Zambales. The BFAR will still carry out MDA flight and also sovereignty patrols. So nothing will be changed because of all this unlawful activities of the Chinese government.
Commodore, I'm just curious, no? Is obviously that helicopter from China, that's a PLA Navy helicopter. For us, it's a kind of a civilian aircraft. It's from the Bureau of Fisheries and Aquatic Resources. As our pilot, he or she is not a military pilot, not a military trained pilot.
Yes, the pilot for the Bureau of Fisheries and Aquatic Resources is not a military pilot. He is just a civilian pilot.
Okay, and would we maybe consider having our pilots trained extra in case they're faced with this? Because my understanding, at least, is it's of course easier to maneuver a helicopter as compared to an airplane, which is what our people were on and our journalists were on. And is there any plan to tweak like a training for pilots, or do we just carry on as we were?
Well, that can be a possibility, but again, in ensuring the safety of our passengers and our public aircraft, we always ensure for the Coast Guard and BFAR that the pilots that we will be utilizing in this kind of dangerous patrol in Bajo de Masinloc or in any parts of the West Philippine Sea that we consider to have high escalatory response with China. We always look at our ace pilots. The same thing like we look at experienced keepers for our Coast Guard vessels, because we need to make sure that they have the experience and competency to prevent such accident once the Chinese Coast Guard vessels or the PLA Navy helicopters are going to come up with unlawful activities.
As expected, Commodore, Beijing has hit right back, saying it was the Philippines that illegally invaded the airspace of China, and it went on to say that our naval and air forces legally tracked, monitored, and warned the aircraft to leave. Is that accurate? They warned the
First of all,
aircraft?
the Chinese government does not have jurisdiction or sovereignty over the waters in Bajo de Masinloc. This was already clearly stipulated with the Philippine Maritime Zones Act that the territorial airspace of Bajo de Masinloc, because we have sovereignty over its territorial waters, belongs to the Philippines. So the claim of China that they have jurisdiction over these waters is actually not legal, or that they do not have basis. They're always good in denying their unlawful activities, but regardless as to whether they have jurisdiction or not, the mere fact that what they did is a violation of international regulations, and it endangered the Filipino people and the crew of our aircraft, is something that should be criticized and called out.
Commodore, I'm just curious, right? We've talked about this, and the last time we spoke to you, it was about the monster ship coming close to the coastline of Zambales. But for the rest of, our EEZ, the West Philippine Sea, how have things been? Do we still observe a big increase in the number of Chinese patrol boats, militia boats, etc.? Do we see a lot of flybys now? How are things in general over the rest of the area?
Well, to be honest with you, I would say that the Chinese government, particularly in 2024, have significantly increased their level of aggression. For example, in 2023, we only saw China Coast Guard vessels carrying out dangerous maneuvers and using water cannon. The year 2024 was completely different. In 2024, we experienced a direct jet stream water cannon attack that even damaged the resupply boats of the Armed Forces of the Philippines. We also experienced a high-speed ramming, wherein the China Coast Guard vessel never hesitated to ram a Coast Guard vessel in its Shoal, also in Bajo de Masinloc. So this happened also for 3 times last year. So and of course the June 17 incident also happened last year. We can say that the Chinese Coast Guard in 2024's response is entirely different with that of the 2023. We can fairly say that the level of aggression has increased compared with 2023, since we started the Transparency Initiative. If you're going to ask me why such behavior happened, I think we can argue that the reason why the Chinese government are doing this, it's because they are responding with our transparency in a way that they want to stop the Philippine government in carrying out transparency efforts. Because for 2 reasons. One, uh, obviously, there is so much reputational damage that has been incurring with China every time we do this kind of exposure of their unlawful and bullying activities in the West Philippine Sea. Secondly, I would argue that the main objective of the Chinese government, why they have elevated their aggression, is to discourage our neighbors, particularly Vietnam, Malaysia, and Indonesia, to adopt the same strategy of exposing Chinese aggression. Because how can you respond with this kind of action um, if all of the Southeast Asian countries are going to tell the world about their aggression?
Well,
It
Commodore,
is not actually accurate to say that it's only the Philippines that are experiencing, incursion or illegal presence
Yeah.
of the Chinese Coast Guard. The
well,
same thing with Indonesia.
Yeah.
Ray Powell, AMTI, Greg Pauling, has been publishing
Yeah.
also enough evidence to say that the illegal patrol of the Chinese Coast Guard vessels
Right.
are also happening in Natuna Island for Indonesia,
Right.
Lacuna Shoals
Yeah.
for Malaysia, and even Vanguard
Yeah.
Bank for and the Paracel Island
Yeah.
in Vietnam.
Yeah.
So the only difference is that we are the one telling the world what is happening,
Right.
and that China is a blatant violator of the international law.
Right. Right.
All right, Commodore, just before we go, we only have a few minutes left. Just wanted to get your thoughts. We've already filed close to 200 diplomatic protests since 2022. But as you mentioned, China's behavior has still escalated. Now, you did describe it as the most dangerous act, this latest incident. How important are diplomatic protests at this point?
Well, the Department of Foreign Affairs have explained this a lot of times because the reporters keep on asking about it. And I would just like to reiterate the position of the Department of Foreign Affairs. As a sovereign state, it's important for us to file this diplomatic protest, for us to tell China and the international community that we do not condone, we are against such unlawful activities, and that we are expressing our dissent with such unlawful activities.
Right.
This kind of diplomatic protest is very important because if we're not going to do that, it would appear like we are just allowing them to keep on violating the international law or to keep on violating and disrespecting our sovereignty and sovereign rights.
Right.